All right. Thank you all for joining us and your interest in the Statewide Community Regrants program. We're going to go over today the Community Arts Grant, the Individual Artist Commission, and the Arts Learning Grant. My name is Lilia Perez. I'm the Grants and Programs Manager for Arts Mid-Hudson, and I'll be giving the presentation today. And we have two other members of our grants team, Amani Jones, who's our Administrative Assistant, and Jonathan Nunez, who is our Administrative Associate. You can reach all of us at grants@artsmidhudson.org or at the phone number listed below. And any one of us might be answering your questions or working with you as you move through this grant process. We offer a lot of assistance and accommodations to be able to apply. So if there's anything specific that you need, please feel free to reach out to us and we will make it work for you as best we can. We can offer translation services for grant assistant, large text documents, technical support if you're trying to figure out how to use Submittable or another program that's, you need to be able, or converting files for your work samples or something like that. We're happy to help. And we also have closed captioning available for this session. And this session is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. A little bit more about the grant assistance we offer. I'm going to get into all the specifics of the program in a few minutes, but this is really designed to be a first-time grant writing opportunity. So if you don't know how to write a grant, or this is your first time seeking out funding for your arts practice or for your organization, rest assured that we offer tons of free technical and grant assistance. You can make an appointment with us. The link is on our website, but you can also, the link is just artsmidhudson.youcanbook.me. That will bring you to a calendar where you can make an appointment and we'll call you at that time. Just know if you go on there and you don't see any openings, sometimes you have to scroll down if there are only appointments in the afternoon. So just make sure you scroll all the way down and check. We also have a proposal eligibility form, which is a short Google form that you can complete, answer some brief questions about your project, and we will give you feedback and let you know. It's really for us to check that's eligible before you start doing a ton of work on your project. So it's optional, but strongly recommended. And as far as the grants assistance appointments, we offer brainstorming, answering your questions, helping you network with groups or individuals or artists that might be helpful to your project, reading and providing feedback on your draft and your budget. Especially for the draft review, it's invaluable to just have one of us read it and give you some feedback, because then I can also say when we meet with our review panel, how we worked with you and what we know about you. So it's kind of like a way for you to get a little bit of a leg up in the process. In addition to this information session, we're going to be doing weekly Q&A sessions on Zoom. So these are informal drop-in sessions where you can just join and we'll answer your questions. And it's a good way to hear questions from other applicants as well. So you can find the link to sign up at this link. If you signed up for the information session, you already have, it's the same Zoom access information. This same way that you access this meeting will be the way you can access any of the Q&A sessions. So today I'm going to go over the purpose of this program, the most important key details and dates, and then I'll go in depth on each of the three categories. If you're watching the video, just know that the first video is going to be an introduction to the program as a whole and an preliminary introduction to each category, and then there will be an additional in-depth video for each category. We're going to talk about how you'll submit your grant proposal and give you some of our grant writing tips. All right. So getting into the purpose of this program, this is made possible with funds from the New York State Council of the Arts. The Statewide Community Regrants program is a regrant program of NYSCA, and it's done with support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. Arts Mid-Hudson administers this funding for Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. And you may know this program, it was previously called the Decentralization Grant Program, or DEC informally. The name changed this year, so it is now called Statewide Community Regrants. And I've seen some other agencies shortening it to SCR. This is a statewide program, so every single county in New York State offers this funding, but there's a different agency for each county. Most agencies serve multiple counties. So NISCA believes, and by extension, this regrant program is really framed around some of these core values that artists are at the center of the creative endeavor and should be compensated for their work. And we want to support as many artist-initiated projects as possible. Strong arts and cultural organizations are vital to connecting the art to people's lives. So we believe that if you strengthen arts and cultural organizations, incorporated or unincorporated, that is how you can really ensure that art is able to be accessed by the average person who may not be an artist or somebody who engages with arts programming or cultural programming in their daily life. And every citizen of New York State can have a meaningful connection to creativity, and every community has a right to cultural self-determination. So that's really the core of why this program exists. It was created in the 70s as a way to decentralize the decision-making on arts funding for New York State out of New York City, where NISCA is based, and give that decision-making power to local agencies who know their communities better and can better support cultural self-determination by each community. So we administer, as I said, this funding for Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. We are interested in centering artists, arts groups, and arts organizations, and centering underrepresented or marginalized artists and arts workers and audiences, which may include Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQIA, or disabled or low income, I'll add, individuals. Local decision-making is made by peer panel review, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So there are 3 categories as a part of this overall program: the Community Arts Grant, the Individual Artist Commission, and Arts Learning Grants. Applicants may submit 1 grant proposal per category for funding, and the cumulative amount may not exceed $5,000. So if you were submitting 3 applications, 1 to each category, the total amount that you're asking of the program cannot exceed $5,000. So you couldn't ask for $5,000 in community arts and $5,000 in arts learning. You would have to have those equal $5,000 together. Important dates. So the deadline is March 14th of this year, and it is an online submission process that closes at midnight. You can expect grant notification in April of 2022, and all funded projects must occur January 1st to December 31st of this year. So we can fund retroactively if a project already occurred or components of the project already occurred, as long as it happened and what you're asking us to fund, those expenses were incurred in 2022. If you're applying for something that has already happened, I really recommend reaching out to us so we can give you a little bit of guidance there, because you'll see that the application is mainly focused on things that will happen, because that's the vast majority of applications that we get. You kind of have a slightly easier job if your project has already happened, because you want to talk about all the amazing things that happen with your project, provide some documentation, and provide really hard figures on how many people were served and how, what you would need the funds to cover or reimburse yourself for. So now I'm going to give an introduction to each of the 3 categories, starting with the Community Arts Grant. So the focus of the Community Arts Grants are to fund public arts and cultural projects, and this is a wide range of activities, which typically include exhibitions, festivals, performances, workshops, and more. But the primary focus of the activity should be the arts. We'll talk about that a bit more later on too, what that means. The funding amount is $500 to $5,000. There is no cash match required, but it is often helpful to show that you have some supplemental income coming into the project or a means of generating earned income through the project. All mediums are eligible, and as I said, must take place in 2022. And it must take place in either Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties, and in the same county as the legal applicant. We can also fund virtual programs, so that would be, obviously, if it's happening virtually, it's not happening at a physical location. All activities must be open and promoted to the public for participation. Who is eligible for this category? Nonprofit organizations that are incorporated in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties are eligible. Libraries, private universities, government entities, and tribal organizations also located in Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties are eligible. And individuals and unincorporated groups may apply directly. They can apply with a partner nonprofit, or they can apply with a nonprofit serving as their fiscal sponsor. And when we get in depth on community arts, I'll talk about what all of those options are. And just know that although it'll be it might be confusing to wrap your head around while we, as we present all of these options, strongly recommend working with us and having a technical assistance appointment to figure out what is the best way to apply for you if you're an individual or unincorporated group. But just know that these options are really offered to accommodate a variety of applicants and situations. Who is ineligible? Public school districts, public universities, New York State agencies and departments, and county level government agencies and departments. That's because they already have access to this statewide pot of money through other sources. Arts Mid-Hudson, our staff and board are not eligible to apply for funding. And this is very important. Any organization that applied directly to NYSCA or Red C are not eligible for funding. And cannot serve as a fiscal sponsor or community partner. If you're unsure if your organization applied for funding in fiscal year 2022, maybe there's been a staff changeover or something, please reach out to us. I have a list of everybody who is ineligible in the 3 counties we serve. And this can apply to individuals as well, especially in the previous year or for this year, there's been a lot of recovery funding that's gone out to individuals. So typically it's just organizations, but this past year, it's actually some individuals as well. All right, some brief information on the Individual Artist Commission. So the focus on this grant is to support an individual artist in the creation of new work, not the presentation of existing work. The grant amount is set at $1,500 and there is no cash match required. All expressive artistic disciplines are eligible. All activities must occur within 2022 and must take place in the same county as the legal applicant. Projects must include a public component, and I'll talk about this later on when we get in depth on Individual Artist Commission. You have 2 options. You do not need to do both of these. You can either present the work you create either in person or virtually in a way that is open to the general public, or you can involve a specific community during your creative process. I will also say that the main focus of this funding is for the creation of new work. So really, I encourage you to think very small as far as the public component, unless of course involving the specific community is really intrinsic to what you're doing as your practice. But I encourage you to think something very small, something that is going to just share the great work that you did during the year, but is not going to be a major expense, because the main focus is on expending funds to artists to create new work. And just, I saw a quick question, which is asking what Red C is. Red C is another regrant program of NYSCA. So if you should definitely take a look at it. It's typically offered to organizations. Okay, so eligibility for the Individual Arts Commission: artists must be at least 18 years of age at the time of submission, must be a resident of Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties in New York State, cannot be enrolled in a full-time degree program. Part-time is okay. Artist collectives, groups, and artist collaborations are not eligible. It has to be one artist. Projects must be independent work initiated by the artist. So it shouldn't be something like a building owner is commissioning an artist to make a temporary installation in the piece, and so the artist can apply. It should really be initiated by the artist. And artists who receive this award cannot apply again. Any recipients of the Individual Arts Commission within the past 3 years are ineligible. So if it took place in 2018 or earlier, you are eligible. And then some quick information about the Arts Learning Grant. So this is a very, probably the category that has the most requirements as far as what is eligible and what is not. And there are some, there's a little, I think a lot of people get confused about whether they should apply to the Community Arts Grant or the Arts Learning Grant for workshops. I'll explain what the Arts Learning Grant is, and then I'll explain the key difference between this one and the Community Arts Grant that we talked about a couple minutes ago. So Arts Learning Grants are focused on supporting sequential skills-based workshop series that last at least 3 sessions for a closed group of learners, which can be in school or in a community-based or after-school setting. We can also fund workshops in the Community Arts Grant, but those are more for drop-in, one-off workshops. Maybe you're going to do a series of 10 workshops and they're all on a different topic, and anyone can drop into the library and participate. That's for Community Arts Grant. The Arts Learning Grant is a lot more focused. It's meant to be the same instructor and the same group of people moving through a minimum of 3 sessions together. And I'll talk in the in-depth video a lot about what closed group means, but that's very critical to it. If the group is already established, that's a good indication that it would most likely be eligible for the Arts Learning Grant. If it's open for open enrollment, anyone can sign up or drop in, then it's really more appropriate for the Community Arts Grant. The funding amount for the Arts Learning Grant is $500 to $5,000, and there is no cash match required. Any artistic discipline is eligible, but we recommend for this category that you're really focused on one discipline throughout so that you're building those skills over the course of the sessions, and it's not one-offs for each of the 3 or more sessions. Has to take place in 2022 in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, and in the same county as the legal applicant. And again, they are intended to serve a closed, dedicated group of learners and are not open to the general public for participation. Some examples of this, obviously for in-school, the closed group is the class or the students that are in that class. For out of school, it might be something like residents of a senior living facility or members of a 4-H club or a Girl Scout troop, or a reoccurring group that meets at the library every month that has already established. Those would be some examples of closed groups. Eligibility. So there's a lot of different ways you can apply to this program, and they are offered to accommodate a variety of situations. If you're applying for an in-school program, nonprofit organizations incorporated in the 3 counties we serve are eligible, and individuals and unincorporated groups are eligible. But in both situations, they must be partnered with an eligible partner public school. So that's for in-school projects. Okay. For after-school and community-based learning, nonprofit organizations can apply directly, quite similarly to the Community Arts Grant. And individuals and unincorporated groups are only eligible if they are applying with a nonprofit serving as their fiscal sponsor. Ineligible, quite similar to the Community Arts Grant, public school districts, meaning public schools can't just apply directly for this program and say, we are applying and hiring an artist. It should be the artist is applying with their partner school. Public universities, state agencies and departments, and county level agencies, departments, Arts Mid-Hudson, our staff and board, and again, NISCA or Red C applicants who applied for funding in fiscal year 2022 are not eligible. And I'll also note here, this applies whether you received the funding or not. If you applied, you are not eligible. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about inclusion accessibility, and this really applies across the board to all 3 of our categories. So at Arts Mid-Hudson, we strive toward broad inclusion and true access to arts and programming for all. And we encourage thoughtful outreach to and efforts to seek input from all groups in our region and specific outreach and inclusion efforts to underserved audiences. And when we say this, we really mean that, for example, if you are planning a program and you say in your application, we are trying to serve Spanish-speaking populations in Dutchess County through this program. But none of the people involved or leadership involved speak Spanish. There's no indication that you'll be hiring anybody to perform translation services or do specific outreach. And maybe it doesn't seem like the program is relevant to that audience. Think about, beyond putting that down on paper, what are the very clear ways that you are demonstrating in your application or through your history as an applicant that you will conduct specific outreach and be as inclusive as possible when serving that specific audience. And when we talk about underserved audiences, again, we are talking about groups who have limited access and I'll say who may have limited access to arts programs, services, or resources due to their location, race, economic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, religion, disability, or other demonstrable factors. Some groups that may be underserved by the arts in our region include Black, Latino, A or E, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQ, disabled, elder, youth, rural, or low-income audiences. So we really want to see, and it's not just actually, it's definitely Arts Mid-Hudson's mission that we're focused on serving artists who are part of these groups, but also serving audiences. But we hear it time and time again from our volunteer review panelists. They want to see specific efforts to reach out to groups that typically don't have access to arts programming. And there are a lot of different groups in our region who are marginalized and may not have access to the same programming that everybody else does. So I really recommend thinking carefully about this or brainstorming with us if you're not sure how to get started in doing something meaningful as far as outreach and inclusion. And for accessibility, priority will be given to activities that take place in locations that are fully compliant with the American Disabilities Act or ADA. And we really strongly suggest you consider accessibility before the event, during, and after the event. So some examples of this beyond the what you might immediately think is that, first of all, planning to ensure that any individual with disabilities is able to fully participate. Providing resources for individuals who are blind or deaf or hard of hearing, translation services, free or pay what you can programs or sliding scale, transportation assistance, childcare assistance, in-person or virtual consideration, and outreach. And really this list that I'm providing are a lot of things that our former grantees have come up with and really come up with creative ways to engage their entire audience in a meaningful and inclusive way. Okay, so now I'll talk about some general things that kind of apply to all three categories as far as our process. So first, I'll mention some projects that are not eligible in any of our categories as a general rule. So the first is we cannot fund any projects that result in permanent public art. This includes murals, sculpture, or landscape art or architecture. We can't fund this because we cannot fund anything that changes the value of a building or land. We can't fund capital improvements. So that is really the core of why we can't fund permanent murals. If it's a temporary installation of a sculpture or a temporary installation of a mural that's maybe being put up on, like wooden slats, and it's going to be affixed to the wall, but then able to be removed, that would be eligible, but it has to be temporary and able to be removed. Activities that are primarily recreational, therapeutic, or rehabilitative or religious in nature are not eligible. Again, the primary focus should be an arts program. If you're not sure or you feel like your program falls in a gray area, that would be a really good time to reach out to us to get some feedback, or think about focusing your expense requests on those that are arts expenses, paying artists or things like that. I just dropped this listed here, and I'll also recommend you can see the full list of ineligible projects in each of the guidelines for each category. But there are some non-arts activities. This is not really our words. This is the words of that come from the state as far as things that we cannot fund. So I'll just point out some of them, which are stand-up comedy, martial arts, clowns, magic. I'll also add programs occurring in private homes. We cannot fund anything occurring in a private home, and sip and paint events. Projects or specific events funded by Arts Mid-Hudson's Jumpstart Grant are not eligible. Those of you that applied to the Jumpstart Grant, today is January 27th. You should be getting funding notification actually within the coming days. So you'll know by the 31st if you are receiving a Jumpstart Grant. If you are, you cannot apply to us for the same project. You can apply to us for a different project. And the same goes for any 2021 Community Arts Grant funded programs that were extended into 2022. Those are not eligible for funding. Like, you can't say we got a 2021 grant, but we had to push it to 2022. So we're going to ask for more money towards that project. We can only fund a project once. Some ineligible expenses for all categories. We can't fund operating expenses of privately owned facilities or capital improvements, acquisition of works of art, contingency funds, lobbying expenses. We cannot fund regrant opportunities by applicants to fund other activities. And along those lines, awards, trophies, certificates, stipends to students, scholarships, fellowships, contests, competitions, cash prizes, and juror fees. We cannot fund any of those. Fees paid to children under the age of 18. We cannot fund any food or costs associated with receptions. There are some, that's a little bit of a gray area, but a hard rule is we cannot fund any food or drinks. We can't fund fundraising events or out-of-state travel costs. The way that all of these applications are determined which ones will receive funding is by peer panel review. So this means that the panel is composed of community members. There are new and returning panelists every year. They're all volunteer, and they all live in the county for the panel that they're serving on. So the Orange County Community Arts Grant would be completely, panel would be completely made up of Orange County residents. Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board do not have a vote in this process. We guide the conversation, we keep time in the meeting. We can offer insight or opinions, but we do not have a vote. And panelists can have access to information on previously funded projects. And please keep in mind that just because you received a grant previously does not guarantee continued support. If you'd like to be a peer panelist or would like to nominate someone else, we have a nomination form on our website, and it's also, this is the link right here. If you receive a grant, there will be some reporting requirements. You'll be asked to complete an interim report, which is basically a paragraph updating us on how your project's going. A final report, which will include some more long form questions. Really, we're trying to get information on what the impact of the project was for you and your audience, and provide some numbers as far as who was served by the project. You'll get all of that information with your contract if you are awarded funding, what the requirements will be. We also ask that if there are any major changes to your project that you'd let us know as soon as possible. And also know that if you apply to this grant, we have just come, we're still in a pandemic, and we're still very much interested in continuing the flexibility that we've been able to grant during this pandemic. So you've probably noticed me mentioning that other people have gotten extensions in previous years. We are able to offer extensions if the circumstances really require it, and can really work with you if you need to change your project a little bit after you apply and receive funding. But it should really still be in line with the main goals and core of what you applied for and what the panel signed off on.